if you are being influenced or brainwashed in any particular negative way, start asking why. This is the only solution I know of so far that can actually negate the effects of influence or brainwashing. If you can only support creators who provide value and make you think, please consider contributing to my Patreon page the next time you watch one of my videos. Hi everybody and welcome. Today I kind of wanted to discuss the difference between brainwashing and influence. Now this is actually a concept that my aunt introduced to me on Facebook because we were having a discussion about my dislike of the mechanisms that surround, say, psychotherapy and stuff, and how some aspects of helping other people are so strictly regulated that only a small percentage of the population could get in, whereas other aspects of self-help have no regulation whatsoever and anybody can enter into those fields. And I said in that post that I tend to prefer the person that has no training or education because they probably have something unique to offer. As in, they work in some other field and got a new perspective that the average psychologist probably wouldn't get. And she kind of took this as me belittling the value that therapists have. And therapists have many, many uses. I've had a great therapist myself. I've had some bad therapists as well. And I've known some truly amazing therapists also. I knew a woman who treated dissociative personality disorder without medication. And I don't think many psychiatrists or individuals in that field would even attempt something like that. And this woman actually had some success. So, recognizing that her field didn't have all the answers, she kind of took a different approach to treating something that the average person in that field would not even think to alter. Which is why, I'm not saying that all therapists are bad or that, even the average therapist is bad. But what I am saying is that the education they receive tends to be biased. It's something that has already been placed through intense regulation, and therefore it means that the change in the field is going to be very slow, and that even though it might be tested, does not mean it's accurate for everybody, and that they kind of, through the process of making it very challenging to get into, limit the types of people that enter that field and thereby kind of lose the value that those people might have. But in that discussion, I told her that we can never be sure what aspects of our lives have been regulated too much or have been influenced too strongly, and education is a prime example of this. You never know for sure how much of what your teachers taught you was for the good of all, and how much of what they taught you was actually beneficial, and how much of what they taught you would actually last. And the longer you're in the schooling system, the more you're exposed to this kind of government-regulated system, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it could also be a bad thing because we all know that the government is not exactly perfect either. And in the schooling system, you kind of have to come at it from the perspective of, these teachers know what they're talking about, and I should listen to what they're saying. And it's only at very specific schools that you have the freedom to be like, well, wait, that doesn't sound right. Like, why is that the case? And this is why in that particular post on Facebook, I was commenting on the value of asking why in everything, because that's the only way you can guarantee you're not being brainwashed into doing something that you don't actually agree with. But what was interesting in this conversation is my aunt actually said that brainwashing and influence are not the same thing. And I went, well, they are different words. But what exactly is the difference for her? And she hasn't responded yet, so, that tells you how new this information is in my eyes. But it got me thinking, what is the difference between brainwashing and influence? Like, what would somebody else think the difference between brainwashing and influence was? And I came to a couple conclusions. Maybe, in her eyes, brainwashing only applies when you're unaware of the influence that somebody is having on you, or brainwashing only applies when it's negative. And these are pretty much the two distinctions that I could think of, or can think of at this particular time. But it did lead to some further questions within my own head, such as, if you know that you're being influenced by something, are you still for sure not being brainwashed to any degree? Additionally, how can you possibly know if information is beneficial or not until you've tested it for many years? And even then, can you know if it was actually beneficial or not? It's hard to say. So, in this discussion of whether brainwashing is different from influence, I kind of come down on the side of, look, they're probably very interconnected, and we can't fully separate them from each other. Now, I do agree that there is a difference. I'm not really sure what that difference is, though. When it comes down to the two arguments I just proposed, I'd probably say that the difference between brainwashing and influence comes down to the awareness. Because we all know that you can have a bad influence. So when you're aware that you're being influenced, perhaps then it is influence. But when you are unaware, then it comes down on the side of brainwashing. And before I move forward, I should say that I don't view brainwashing as necessarily bad all the time either. You know, just as influence can be positive or negative, so can brainwashing. And I know that brainwashing gets a really bad reputation because, you know, it kind of suggests taking hold of somebody else's brain and making them do things they wouldn't normally do. But this is also why it's important to question, which was the whole point of that post on Facebook. So, when it comes down to awareness, if you know you're being influenced, then it's influence. But when you are being influenced, a lot of the information you're getting is going to be verbal or images or things like that. But we have no idea what percentage of that you are fully aware of. More than likely, at least part of it you are not aware of, which means that in every influence, there is some brainwashing. Similarly, in brainwashing, if you become at all aware of it, part of it becomes influence instead. Now, brainwashing and influence, from my perspective, are only ever the first step, because you can give somebody information, but it is kind of up to them to integrate it into their brain. Now, one of the aspects of brainwashing that comes most often is the repetition of it. You know, like you're continually exposed to it over and over and over again until you start to believe it yourself, which means that if a whole lot of people in the world are telling you you're ugly or you have bad hair or, you know, your teeth are too yellow or all these other things, and you're told that enough times, you would eventually start to internalize it, despite the fact that it may not be true at all. I mean, there could be some aspects of truth in it as well, but it may not be true. And you just don't know. But because you're getting so much feedback, you can't help but think it about yourself sometimes. And that is kind of an indication of how brainwashing could work. But that's also how influence could work, because when somebody tells you that you're ugly or that your hair is terrible or that your teeth are too yellow, you know what they're telling you. What you don't get is how each comment affects you internally. You know, like what exactly shifts in your brain after somebody says that to you. I know that Kane Ramsey, he's one of the life coaching teachers I have on Udemy, and I really enjoy a lot of his work and what he has to say. But he has a Facebook group as well, which I enjoy communicating with. And he mentioned at one point, he asked the question, what is holding you back? You know, like what specific physical thing is actually holding you back? And that this can be a very good question for us to ask. And really what he's saying, from my perspective, is that we need to start looking at past influences and instances of brainwashing and start questioning their validity once again, because after a while, brainwashing and influence both transition into actual beliefs about the self and can alter the way you behave. So you do need to reevaluate many of these things, particularly if they are hindering you in some way. So even if you're talking about brainwashing and influence as being a bad thing and controlling, you still have the power to change them, which was the point I made in that post, is that you need to start asking why. Asking yourself why you behave the way that you do, asking other people why they ask you to do the things they want you to do, asking them why they do the things that they do. Now, I have gotten some feedback from people saying that this is not entirely feasible because in jobs like the military or, as firefighters, you don't really want people asking why. And the reason you don't want people asking why is because when in the field, it could be the difference between saving somebody's life or somebody dying. That split second where you doubt. So instant obedience is something that they train because it could save your life and it could save somebody else's life. And while I understand this perspective, that only applies on the field. And this is where I think the problem arises. You have to allow the questioning at some point. And if you expect instant obedience, but never explain the why, I really hope that the people under your influence, under your brainwashing, will eventually start to doubt you, because it's not a good idea if a general tells his soldiers to instantly obey him, and then he flips to becoming an enemy spy. Now all his soldiers are his little puppets doing things against what they believe is right overall, even though they don't necessarily know the big picture. So the why aspect is extremely important, because if a soldier goes, well, that's not usual, that's not normally what we would do, like, why is that? Why are we doing that right now? That could prevent things like this from happening much sooner than they usually are discovered. And, I'm not saying that this happens often. I seriously doubt that it does, but clearly people do change sides. And obviously we all have influence over each other. We all have the ability to brainwash other people. We all have the capability to kind of influence people to come under our direction and our sway, which is probably one of the reasons why I come onto YouTube in the first place, is because I'm like, we need to start making these decisions for ourselves. It really doesn't help for us to just believe what everybody else is saying. That doesn't help. We need to start coming to our own conclusions. It's vitally important. You can listen to somebody else and you can take what they are saying into consideration, but you need to be the one that asks why. And you need to ask yourself, is this a good idea for me? Is this feasible? Will this work in my life? And things like that. Start questioning, and then you can negate the negative influence of both influence and brainwashing. And that's not to say that some things won't sink through unexpectedly, but because you're starting to do the evaluation, you are more likely to catch those issues than somebody who hasn't started asking the questions yet. So I think that's everything I have to say today. I know that it's in its infancy, this concept in my head, but I hope that it really did get you thinking, how this may be impacting your life as well. It's definitely been a lot of fun for me to think this over, even though I've only been doing it for a couple of hours. But it's quite fun to explore this concept, and maybe at some point I'll do more videos on this concept as well. But absolutely, whenever you wonder, if you are being influenced or brainwashed in any particular negative way, start asking why. This is the only solution I know of so far that can actually negate the effects of influence or brainwashing. You have to start asking yourself, you have to start asking other people, and you have to start questioning. So definitely I encourage you to do that. If you want to know more about that particular aspect, I suppose the reason that you ask why is so that you understand, and I can't really explain it further than that, other than, you understand what's going on, you understand where people are coming from, and you are now free to make your own decisions. So, I think that's a pretty good reason as to why you should ask why. But, maybe you want more. I don't know. But I'll stop drawing this out. So, thanks for watching. Make sure to like the video, click the subscribe button, notification bell, and if you have any questions or comments or ideas for future videos, make sure to leave those in the comment section below, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.